Hi everyone, and welcome to the Business Purpose Trends podcast for another week. I'm Phil Preston, and today we're looking at horizontal relationships. And by the way, that's not a euphemism for something, in case your mind went there. I'm not saying it did, but just in case it did. And I'm looking at horizontal relationships because as a professional facilitator, my role is often to bring horizontal relationships together. So for example, it's working across structures or across organizations regularly. An example is from many years ago now when I started out in my consulting, speaking, facilitating career. I was working with a very large organization that had brought me in on a project, and it was interesting because there was a big risk involved in this organization that was potentially putting billions of dollars at risk. Now, there was 7 stakeholders involved or affected. 5 were within the organization, 2 were outside of the organization. And the issue was that no one party or individual stakeholder was taking ownership and driving a solution. So the chair of this particular entity deemed this an unacceptable risk and that they needed someone in to fulfill that role as the facilitator of that process. And while that role is often needed in very complex and critical situations such as that one, in today's terms, in the world we live in today, it's a core skill that every leader and manager could or should be developing. Now, I've got to say, just stepping back for a moment, this topic is partly inspired by Natalie, who pointed me to an article about decision-making. And Natalie's an expert in critical thinking and decision-making methods. And with the pace of change that we're experiencing, and the drive for a lot of organizations to want to work in a very agile and fast and effective way, that means decision-making is being spread out into the organization more. It's not so concentrated in very specific people or roles. And therefore, lifting or elevating the level of quality of decision-making across organizations is essential. And they're often dealing with, and maybe this is your world as well, you're often dealing with change that involves many stakeholders, both within your organization and perhaps outside as well. So as you imagine, there might be a link to purpose here. And the question really is, well, what is the role of purpose in decision-making? And a lot of that comes back to this horizontal relationship challenge versus vertical relationships, which I'll outline what I mean by that a little later on. So the article Natalie alerted me to was called Driving Innovation with Better Decision-Making. But it actually spurred beyond. It took me down a rabbit hole, actually, because it took me into revisiting some papers and ideas around cross-functional teams. And what does a good cross-functional team look like? Or what are the conditions that help you create teams that can work together across silos? I ended up revising some of the work of Amy Edmondson, who's done some great work in this space as well, who says we tend to prioritize or default to vertical relationships over horizontal ones, i.e. dealing with the people you report to or those who are reporting to you. Those vertical relationships are often easier to deal with than ones that are outside of that realm. And one quote that came from that article was, "You know you should swim farther to catch a bigger fish, but it's a lot easier to swim in your own pond and catch a bunch of small fish." And following that on with another quote, and this was in terms of performance, and it was relating to a specific case study. But the quote was, "Employees who can reach outside their silos learn more and sell more than those who don't." So what are we really talking about here? Well, the mental model I'm using in thinking about organizations doing great work that is aligned to what people in society really need, and doing it in a way that maximizes the organization's resources and skills and abilities and leads their people on to becoming part of something truly great, has 4 components. So the mental model I use, component number 1 is having the right mindset. So that's realizing what you do in your organization is not independent of what's going on around you. So, you have frictions and interactions and contacts with society. You're not separate entities. Not that anyone probably truly thinks that, but I think in the past, many organizations have been very fixated on profits, not really factoring in stakeholder needs outside of their organization. So purpose and societal benefit should be front of mind at this point where you're thinking about, well, what's the mindset we need to take on our challenges in the world we're faced with today? And if we think about greenhouse gas emissions, for example, we can look at consumer brands or consumer food brands and what people think about their product and how it's brought to the supermarket, what packaging it's in. You know, these factors are affecting consumers, they're affecting communities. So those broader stakeholder groups and voices are needed. Point number two, you need clarity of direction and focus. And purpose gives you that. It tells you where you're aiming, and we need to question what success looks like, because it will involve non-financial metrics as well as financial ones. In a way, getting those non-financial metrics and measures and outcomes right is probably what will be driving your financial success or otherwise. So think about an insurance company, or say a health company who says we're about improving lives. What does that really mean? What are those indicators of success? Because getting them right will help fuel performance, competitive advantage, and profitability for for-profit companies. So we looked at right mindset, we've looked at clarity of direction and focus. The third element is transforming leadership. So this is equipping leaders with the new skills they need to be able to drive this change and put this into action within their organizations. It's very much around moving from that role of leader. Traditionally, we might have thought of the leader as commander, and switching to that mode of where the leader is more the coach. They're the catalyst. They make things happen. They're the curator of conversations. They have to be an expert communicator, and lots of words starting with C seem to come up here in this field. So leaders need to be able to work across silos horizontally to create the change that delivers the purpose and therefore drives the performance and impact that they and their organizations are after. And the fourth part of this model is improving execution. So all those plans are great and all those skills and capabilities are awesome, but it doesn't mean much if you don't execute on the plan. So this is about realizing the potential on many levels. So doing the things you plan to do, such as distilling your organizational goals down into team goals and individual goals. It's about creating positive work cultures that engage people, they energize people, and they give more than what they normally give in any other work situation. It's about enabling team-based critical thinking and high-quality decision-making. And that's where I'd circle back to Natalie briefly. So that's her expertise in building out those methods and techniques for that part. And it's about communicating the right things to the right people in the right way. So what role does purpose play in these challenges? So recapping those four areas are right mindset, clarity of direction, transforming leadership, and improving execution. No matter which of those four components we're in, purpose plays a key role. Sometimes it's very direct and clear, and other times it might seem a little bit more indirect, but purpose really is behind all of those four factors. So I want to focus on one specific area for now, and that comes from the article that Natalie referred me to, and it was an article on better decision-making by the authors were Hill, Teddards, and Swan. A key component of that process is encouraging candid, robust conflict in service to the end customer. So having conversations that aren't guarded or maybe tainted by professional agendas, to really focus on that end customer as a way of bringing people together and aligning the whole organization around that common purpose, because it gives people the permission to fight for new ideas or new methods because they all agree on what they're fighting for. So purpose gives you that courage, and it can keep debates from getting personal. It can encourage criticism where it's needed and warranted versus silence, because it's probably arguably more dangerous for people to accept something and go along with it, even though they disagree with it. You want to have that, I guess, a candid conversation around these the problems that might be faced. And a quote from that article is, "A common purpose helps decision makers focus on solving problems rather than fulfilling personal agendas." So this is one of the areas where the rubber really hits the road, whether it's about forming new products, new strategies, adjusting policies, processes, other things operationally. It will or need to involve prioritizing horizontal relationships in many cases and not defaulting to those vertical ones. And in many cases, overlaying purpose gives you that critical voice, the one that you may not always hear in your meetings or in your internal dialogues, which could be that of the customer, the community, and other stakeholders that are arguably more important to the process than you are. And this can be the difference between failure and success of a project or initiative. You don't want to get weeks, months, even years down the track with something and find out, well, not having that voice really has caused it to fail from the get-go. As I mentioned, as a professional facilitator, quite often my role is to bring horizontal relationships together. And top of mind for me in that process is, well, what is it that is or could be motivating these people to come together? And that's typically about honing in on purpose so that we can march towards a common goal and have that ability to disagree because we're all fighting for something that we all believe in. So I invite you to reflect on your decision-making processes that go beyond boundaries of the people and teams that you normally work with. What are your observations there? What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear them. That's this week's update, and you'll find my contact details in the show notes, along with some links to some resources of mine. Thanks so much for tuning in to the Business Purpose Trends podcast. I'm Phil Preston. Have a great day, and may the business purpose trend be with you.